In the endless sea, there are places no map dares to show, a crew lost to the waves, and an island hidden by the fog. They thought they found paradise, but the island was alive. "Captain, it's moving." They came seeking treasure and found a curse older than the sea itself. "You shouldn't have come." The island sank, but the curse did not. "There's a city beneath us, made of gold." Now, the sea remembers, and it waits. Every wave hides a story. This one never ended.
Hey there! Welcome to Shadows of Tales. I'm here to help you unwind and relax tonight, and I'm really glad you chose to spend these moments with me. Before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we create here. Your support means a lot, but your comfort always comes first. Feel free to drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see our little community connecting from different corners of the world. It reminds us that even in the quietest, darkest moments, none of us are truly alone. I hope you'll give this video a chance because I truly believe you won't find stories quite like these anywhere else. Every tale here is crafted to help you drift into the night with ease, a mix of calm, mystery, and a touch of shadow. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan or a soft lamp, take a deep breath, let the day fade away, and let's begin our story together.
Chapter 1. The Silent Sea Before the Storm.
The ocean stretched endlessly beneath a bruised red sky, silent, cold, and merciless. On its restless waves sailed the mariner's wrath, a ship as old as the men who feared her. Her sails were torn, her wood blackened by storms long forgotten, yet she moved forward, as if guided by a purpose older than her captain's will. Captain Elias Crow stood at the helm, his weathered hand gripping a map that had ruined better men before him. Its parchment was yellowed, marked by symbols no scholar could decipher, and a single island, drawn in stark black ink, right at the edge of the known world. The crew whispered among themselves, their faces lit only by lanterns swinging in the biting ocean wind. "It's just a story," one of them muttered, pulling his coat tighter. "A ghost story to scare children." "A story doesn't drag a ship through 10 storms," another replied, his voice barely a whisper. "We shouldn't be here." They had all heard the tales. In every tavern along the coast, the legend was the same. An island hidden by mist, impossibly rich with gold, guarded by the restless dead. Every sailor swore it existed, though none who went searching ever came back. As they ventured further into uncharted waters, the world around them began to warp. The compass needles spun wildly, as if drunk, pointing nowhere and everywhere at once. The waves beneath them grew colder, darker. Even the stars overhead seemed to dim, swallowed by thick clouds that followed the ship like a curse. Elias lifted his eyes toward the horizon, his gaze fixed on the unknown. "There," he muttered, tracing the black lines on the map with a gloved finger. Beyond the crimson current, his first mate, a grizzled man named Harlan, stepped forward, his face etched with worry. "Captain, we've gone too far. The sea ain't right here. The gulls stopped following us 2 days ago." "That's a bad omen." Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. The sound of the wind had changed. It carried voices, now faint whispers that seemed to call his name, promising riches and ruin in the same breath. Sometimes, late at night, when the sea was still, he thought he heard laughter bubbling up from beneath the waves. The crew had begun to change as well. Their dreams were now filled with blinding golden light and screaming faces. One sailor, a young lad from the southern isles, swore he saw a ghost ship beneath them upside down, sailing through the deep, its skeletal crew staring up at him from the crushing darkness. He refused to look over the side again. By the 7th day, even the sea itself seemed alive. The waves rose higher, but not from the wind. They moved as if something vast and ancient stirred in the depths below. "Captain!" A shout echoed from the lookout high above. "There's something in the water." Elias rushed to the rail and looked down. A glimmer, faint and golden, flashed beneath the black surface. Then, another, and then dozens. Coins, thousands of them, spinning slowly just beneath the surface like a shower of falling leaves made of pure gold. They weren't sinking, they were waiting. "It's a sign," whispered one sailor, his eyes wide with greed. The island's calling to us. It's welcoming us, but Elias knew better. This wasn't a welcome. This was a warning. The wind shifted, sudden and sharp, and the ship groaned as thunder rolled across the heavens, though the sky was clear just moments before. The sea ahead turned from dark blue to a deep, ominous red, a thick, churning current twisting like blood through the waves. The crimson current. "Hold the course," Elias shouted, his voice cutting through the growing fear. "We ride it through to the island." The storm struck without warning. Rain hammered the deck like musket fire. Lightning split the sky in jagged spears, and the ship tilted dangerously as colossal waves rose like liquid mountains around them. The crew clung to ropes and rails, their screams mixing with prayers and curses. Elias fought his way toward the helm, icy water slashing across his face. "Steady. Keep her steady," he roared, wrestling with the wheel as the sea tried to tear it from his grasp. But through the chaos, something else rose with the waves of voice, low and distant, echoing through the heart of the storm. "Turn back, or be claimed." It wasn't thunder. It wasn't the wind. It was a whisper that crawled into their ears and froze the very blood in their veins. The ship's lanterns flickered, one by one, then died, plunging them into near-total darkness. The only light came from the sea itself, glowing faintly from below, pulsing with a malevolent golden fire. And then, through a sudden break in the mist ahead, for the briefest, heart-stopping second, Elias saw it. The outline of an island, black, jagged cliffs, a forest of dead, skeletal trees, and something shining, pulsing deep within its heart. Then darkness. The ship plunged into the fog, swallowed whole by the unknown. The voyage had ended. The nightmare had just begun.
Chapter 2. The Island That Shouldn't Exist.
The fog was alive. It twisted and curled around the ship like a living thing, wrapping the entire crew in a cold, damp shroud. The mariner's wrath groaned under the immense weight of the storm, its masts creaking like old bones, the sails torn to ribbons by unseen hands in the gale. The sea itself boiled beneath them, dark as ink and just as heavy. Captain Elias Grow fought the wheel, his arms aching and numb, his coat completely soaked through. Every time lightning tore the sky open, it was for just a heartbeat, but it was long enough to reveal monstrous shapes writhing in the clouds, faces of things that should never exist. His crew scrambled frantically across the heaving deck, their shouts lost in the wind, pulling on ropes that no longer seemed to obey. Some men were praying, their words snatched away by the roar. Others were screaming. The ocean was louder than both. "We're gonna sink," yelled Arlan, the first mate, his face pale with terror. "The sea is swallowing us whole. Hold fast." Elias roared back over the hurricane. "The map said the storm guards the island. If we turn back now, we are lost for good." A deafening crack of thunder answered him, shaking the ship to its very core. The compass on the helm spun violently, a blur of motion before it froze solid, pointing straight into the impenetrable wall of fog. "She's guiding us," whispered one of the younger sailors, his eyes wide with a strange, unnerving madness. "She wants us there." Elias glanced at him, his brow furrowed. "Who's she?" The boy only smiled, rain dripping from his chin like tears. "The one who calls from the deep." Then lightning struck the water, and for one blinding, impossible instant, the fog lit up in a brilliant, ethereal gold. An island. It was right ahead. Its cliffs rose from the sea like jagged teeth, wrapped in a mist that seemed to glow faintly from within. Palm trees bent backward from a wind they couldn't feel. Black rocks glistened, as if they were coated in oil, and at the island's heart, something shimmered a light, far too steady to be fire. "Land!" A lookout screamed from the crow's nest. The word hit them like salvation itself. A wave of relief washed over the deck as the crew erupted in cries of hope and utter disbelief. "Drop the anchor," Elias commanded, his voice filled with newfound strength. "We've found it." But as the heavy anchor plunged into the water with a loud splash, the ocean went silent, abruptly, terrifyingly quiet. No more thunder, no more wind. The waves that had tried to kill them only moments before now lay perfectly still, a mere flat surface reflecting the dark, brooding sky. The silence was unbearable, more frightening than the storm. The men looked at each other, their faces etched with confusion and fear. Even the air smelled different, no salt, no life, only the cloying scent of rot and damp earth. Elias lit a lantern and leaned over the ship's side. Below the surface, the anchor chain disappeared into murky, greenish depths. Something shimmered down there, faint glints of gold, like coins drifting lazily upward through the water. "Captain," Harlan whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's like the sea's made of treasure." "No," Elias said, his own voice low and grim. "It's made of what treasure costs." The ship drifted closer to the shore, the sound of wood scraping against something solid beneath the waterstones. Or maybe bones. On the beach stood statues, dozens of them, men and women, carved in exquisite, horrifying detail. Their faces were twisted in sheer terror, arms raised as if they were warding off something unseen. "No sculptor could have made those," another said, shaking his head. "Not out here." The statues lined the black sand like silent sentinels, guarding the island. Behind them, the jungle waited, dense and unnervingly still. Elias felt his pulse pounding in his throat. "We found it." The thought filled him with equal parts wonder and a deep, chilling dread. He turned to his exhausted men. "Prepare the robots. We make landfall at dawn." But even as he spoke the words, the fog thickened again, swallowing the view. Their lanterns seemed to dim, the temperature dropping sharply. And then, from the island, came a sound. Faint, but unmistakable. The sound of drums. Slow, rhythmic, beating like a distant, massive heartbeat. The men froze, every one of them. "You hear that, Dave?" whispered one of them, his eyes darting towards the shore. Elias nodded slowly. "Someone, or something, knows we're here." Lightning flashed one last time, a blinding sheet of white, and in that instantaneous flash, every single statue on the beach had changed. Their heads were now turned toward the sea, toward them. Then, darkness returned. The drums continued their steady, patient rhythm. The mariner's wrath drifted silently on the tide, a ghost ship on still water, staring into the eyes of the island that had been waiting, perhaps for centuries, for their arrival. The storm was over, but the true curse had only just begun.
Chapter 3. Footsteps in the Golden Sand.
The storm has passed, leaving behind a dead calm. The ocean, a mirror of dark glass, holds our ship, the mariner's wrath, in its silent embrace. The air is thick with the smell of rain-soaked wood and iron. But something is wrong. There are no birds, no wind, no sound of waves. It's as if the sea itself is holding its breath. Our first mate Halum puts it best. The sea's holding its breath. I don't answer him. My gaze is fixed on the shore ahead, a crescent of sand as black as coal. Lined along it are what look like broken statues. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. But even from this distance, a cold dread settles in my gut. Those aren't stone. They're human. They stand frozen along the beach, their bodies locked in poses of fear, prayer, and agony. The fog drifts between them, a ghostly shroud that reveals and conceals their twisted faces in a nightmarish dance. My hand tightens on the ship's rail. There's only one thing to do. "Lower the boats," I say, my voice quieter than I intended. The crew hesitates. I can see the exhaustion and dread etched onto every face. It's a fear that sticks to you, thick and oily. Harlan, ever loyal, barks at them, his own voice trembling but firm. "You heard the captain. We ain't sailed through hell to turn back now." The robots creak as they are lowered into the water. The sound of the oars dipping into the still ocean is unnervingly loud, each splash echoing across the suffocating silence. As we draw closer to the island, the fog seems to pull back, as if observing our approach. The sand isn't just black, it's glassy, glistening like shattered obsidian. The moment my boots touch the shore, the air turns colder, and the world goes completely silent. Even the distant sound of the ocean vanishes. One of the sailors whispers, "It's quiet." Another mutters, "Aye, the kind that comes before something bad." He's right. We move cautiously between the petrified figures. Up close, the horror is sickeningly real. Eyes wide in terror, mouths opened in silent screams. Some clutch their chests, others hold each other in a final, frozen embrace. One man is on his knees, with tears carved down his cheeks. But they aren't stone, they're salt crystals, glittering in the faint light. Harlan's voice is barely a whisper. "Captain, these ain't statues." I kneel by one of them, a woman with her face turned to the sky. I brush the dust from her cheek, and the skin crumbles under my touch, thin and brittle like old parchment. They were human. All of them. What happened to them? A young sailor asks, his voice cracking. I stand up, looking towards the dense, dark jungle that looms ahead. The island did, I reply. We press further inland, our boots crunching on the black sand. The beach is a graveyard of ships, broken vessels from centuries past half buried in the ground. We see rusted anchors, shattered masts, and skeletons tangled in rotting ropes, all grim warnings of this island's true nature. Ahead, the jungle rises like a solid green wall, its trees taller than any I've ever seen, their roots twisting across the ground like monstrous veins. A thick mist pours from between the trees, clinging low to the earth, and then we hear it. A faint, pulsing sound, like a deep heartbeat rising from the island's core. Drums, whispers join the rhythm, ghostly voices speaking in a language lost to time. Harlan glances nervously towards the sound. Captain, we shouldn't go in there. But we came for the treasure, the legendary gold of the silent shore. We came for the gold, I say, though even my own voice shakes with uncertainty. And we'll find it. The men follow, their reluctance a heavy weight behind me. The path winds between jagged stones carved with strange symbol spirals, eyes, and hands reaching upwards. Some of the carvings glow with a faint, sickly light in the deep shade. One of the sailors, Marin, stops near a broken totem stained with old, dark blood. At its base, a single golden coin glimmers. Look, he whispers, reaching down and picking it up. Treasure! The instant his fingers touch the coin, a sound like a long, drawn-out sigh escapes from the ground beneath him. The trees around us groan, their massive trunks shifting as if waking from a deep slumber. Marin stumbles back, clutching his hand. Blood trickles from his palm, yet there is no cut. The coin is burning him. I grab his wrist, pry the cursed thing from his grasp, and toss it away. It hits the sand and vanishes, sinking as if the island itself swallowed it whole. I look up, and my blood runs cold. Every single one of the statues on the beach has turned. They are all facing us now, their empty eyes watching our every move. Back to the ship, Harlan screams. But it's too late. The fog has rolled back in, thicker than ever, swallowing the shoreline and our path to escape. We are trapped. And then a new sound rises from the jungle. Laughter. It isn't human. It's high, broken, and ancient, like an echo trying to remember how to be alive. Harlan whispers, Captain, there's something here. The shadows between the trees seem to pulse, to breathe. I say, my voice low, and it's awake. From the heart of the jungle, a low horn sounds a deep, ancient note that vibrates through our bones. The crew freezes. The very air trembles with its power. We hear something massive moving between the trees, unseen but terrifyingly close. The black sand beneath our feet begins to shift, pulling us down like quicksilver. Ol Arahandos. The statues crack, one by one, releasing faint sighs into the air, as if they are finally exhaling after centuries of silence. I draw my blade, my only comfort in this waking nightmare. Hold fast, I shout, but the ground is unstable, and my own footing is unsure. The fog swirls violently, and within it shapes begin to form translucent figures, shimmering with a faint golden light. The lost sailors of this cursed island, their faces emerging from the mist, their mouths moving without a sound. And then, from the deepest, darkest part of the jungle, two massive, glowing eyes open. They are ancient, intelligent, and utterly inhuman. A voice follows, not from a single source, but from everywhere at once, whispering through the trees, through the sand, through the very air we breathe. Welcome home, wanderers of the deep. The earth gives a final, violent tremble, and the drumming stops. A single tear rolls down my cheek. I don't know if it's from fear or... The silence that follows is the most terrifying thing of all. It is not peace. It is the island listening.
Chapter 4. The Whispering Shadows of the Jungle.
The jungle was a wall of green shadows, an ancient silence, the air thick with the taste of copper and decay. Each tree rose like a pillar in some forgotten temple, their roots coiling and pulsing as if alive. The men stood at its edge, their lanterns flickering weakly tiny sparks against the endless dark. Captain Elias Crow took a step forward. The ground squelched beneath his boot stamp, soft, breathing. Stay close, he said, his voice a low command. and no one touches anything. As they entered, the fog thinned, but the air grew heavier, pressing against their skin. Every sound, each footstep, every exhale came back as a whisper, echoing faintly from the trees. "Echoes one?" Sailor asked, his voice wavering. "No," said Harlan, his hand gripping the hilt of his cutlass. "Not echo. Echo. They're answering." The deeper they ventured, the darker it became. The sun vanished behind a canopy so thick it felt like night. Strange lights glimmered among the gnarled rootstini, drifting orbs, like fireflies made of glass. One brushed against a sailor's arm. His skin blistered instantly where it touched, and he bit back a scream. "Keep moving," Elias hissed, his eyes darting into the oppressive gloom. They moved single file through a narrow path lined with carved stones. Each was etched with the same spiral symbol on, eye within a circle. As they passed, faint whispers rose from the stones themselves. "What are they saying?" asked Marin, his voice trembling. "Prayers," Elias replied, his own voice tight. "Or warnings." Then, a sound from deep within the jungle shattered the quiet, the crack of breaking branches, the groan of ancient trees. The ground trembled underfoot. Birds, if they were birds, scattered above, shrieking like terrified children. The men froze. A heavy breathing filled the air deep, slow, almost human. And then, silence. Elias lifted his lantern, its flame flickering weakly. "Whatever it is," he murmured, "it's watching us." They reached a clearing, a ring of stones surrounding a pool of perfectly still, black water. The surface reflected nothing. At its edge stood an altar carved from obsidian, its surface stained with dried blood and a dusting of gold. Harlan stepped closer, frowning. "Looks like an offering pit." "Aye," Elias whispered. "But who's the offering for?" He touched the stone. It was warm. Beneath his fingers, the carvings began to glow faintly, one by one golden lines spreading like veins through the altar. The water rippled. Something was stirring beneath it. Suddenly, their reflections appeared on the surface, but they moved a heartbeat too late. The sailors stumbled back. Captain Marin's voice cracked. "Our shadows there." He didn't finish. His reflection smiled at him. The real Marin fell backward, screaming. The reflection's pale hands broke through the surface, dragging him under in a single, silent motion. The water swallowed him without a splash. The crew rushed to the edge, but the pool was calm again, as if nothing had happened. "No," whispered Harlan, his face pale. "He's gone." "No," Elias said quietly, his gaze fixed on the black water. "He's here." A ripple spread across the pool, and from the depths, dozens of faces, emerged human, ghostly, their mouths open in silent screams. The sailors fell back, tripping over roots. Back. Elias roared. To the path. They ran, but the jungle was no longer the same. The path behind them had shifted. Trees had moved, their roots twisting into new patterns, closing in like a trap. The whispers grew louder, overlapping voices speaking in an ancient, forgotten tongue. "They're hurting us." Harlan gasped, fighting for breath. "Like prey." "Keep going." Elias yelled. The jungle opened suddenly into a vast ruin, towering stone pillars, cracked and overgrown with vines. At the center stood a statue of a woman, her body wrapped in serpents, her eyes made of emeralds that glowed faintly in the dim light. "The sea goddess," Elias murmured, his voice filled with awe and dread, "the one they worshipped before the storms." The statue's mouth was open, and inside, something gleamed, a golden crown resting on a pedestal. Harlan stared, his eyes wide. "That's it, Captain. That's the treasure." Elias hesitated. "No treasure sits unguarded." "Then we take it together," Harlan insisted. As they stepped forward, the whispers stopped. The air turned cold, thick with pressure, like the deep sea crushing down on them. The crown shimmered on the statue's emerald eyes blinked. A sound tore through the jungle, low and inhuman, a roar made of wind, water, and pure rage. Vines shot out, wrapping around the nearest sailor, snapping his bones like twigs. His scream was cut short as he was pulled into the earth, leaving only a splash of blood behind. "Run!" Elias shouted. The statue's mouth opened wider, spewing a torrent of golden dust that burned the skin like fire. The air came alive with shadows, shapes swirling around them, women with eyes like lanterns, their mouths full of seawater. "The Guardians!" Elias gasped, shoving his men forward. The crew fled through the ruins, tripping over roots and the corpses of those who came before. The jungle now roaring like a storm. Behind them, the statue cracked, pieces falling away to reveal something breathing inside. Elias looked back once, just once, and saw the impossible. The statue's heart, beady and glowing gold through the stone. "It's alive," he whispered in horror. The surviving crew stumbled back toward the shore, their lanterns gone, the fog closing in once more. But the whispers followed them now, no longer from the jungle, but from inside their own heads. Each voice sounded familiar. Each one spoke their name. And as they collapsed on the sand, gasping for air, Elias looked back at the trees. He saw figures standing there, watching. Shadows of the men who had died. Their faces were blank, their eyes empty. The island had taken them, and it wasn't finished yet.
Chapter 5. The Treasure Room of the Dead.
The morning came, gray and lifeless. The storm hadn't passed. It was just sleeping above the clouds, waiting. The sea had become a mirror again, flat and still, as if the island itself were holding its breath. Captain Elias Crow stood at the edge of the beach, his gaze fixed on the tree line where the jungle had swallowed his men. Only 4 remained now. Their faces were pale, hollow, etched with a fear that had settled deep into their bones. No one spoke. The fog around them whispered like a dying breath, clinging to the damp air. Suddenly, the silence shattered. "We're leaving." Harlan's voice was rough, final. He threw his pack onto the sand with a heavy thud. "To hell with your treasure." Elias didn't even look at him. His focus remained on the oppressive green wall of the jungle. "The ship's gone. Harlan, you saw it yourself, torn to pieces by the rocks. There's no leaving this place until we find another way. Then we die here," Harlan spat back, his voice cracking with despair. At that, Elias finally turned. His eyes were dark, cold pits of resolve. "Not before we finish what we came for." There was no arguing with that tone. They followed the coastline north, where the cliffs rose high and black, carved by ages of wind and salt into jagged, monstrous shapes. It was somewhere behind these cliffs that Elias had seen it, a fleeting flicker of gold deep within the rock, a glint of promise, as if the island itself were bleeding treasure. The men moved in a grim, silent procession. Every few steps served as a haunting reminder of their folly. They passed the remnants of others who had come before. Rusted anchors half buried in the sand, shattered chests, spilling rotted wood, and bones always, the bones, picked clean by the elements and time. Finally, the path ended. Before them, the mouth of a cave yawned open like a fresh wound in the cliff face. A cold draft breathed out from the darkness, carrying a scent of iron and decay. The walls inside were slick with moss and salt, the ground uneven and treacherous beneath their worn boots. "Light it," Elias commanded, his voice echoing slightly in the opening. The men raised their lanterns. The small flames danced, casting long, shaking shadows that writhed on the stone like living things. The cave descended sharply, winding deeper and deeper into the island's heart. And as they went, they noticed strange carvings lining the walls, spirals' eyes, and coiling serpents, all etched into the stone and, impossibly, filled with gold dust. The symbols seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light, a slow, rhythmic beat. "It's alive," one sailor whispered, his voice trembling. "The island. It's bleeding gold." "Keep moving," Elias ordered, his own voice tight, betraying none of the awe or fear that was beginning to grip them all. They pressed onward, and the narrow tunnel suddenly opened into a vast, breathtaking chamber. The sight stole their breath, silenced their fears for a glorious moment. Mountains of coins, jewels, and ancient relics were piled high, glimmering faintly under their lantern light. There were gold cups, ivory statues, crowns encrusted with gems, swords with hilts of pure silver, and gemstones as large as a man's fist. It was the treasure of centuries, the collected riches of all who had vanished on this cursed shore. "We found it," Harlan breathed, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on madness. "By God, we actually found it." Elias stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into a dune of coins. He ran his fingers through a pile of them. They felt warm to the touch, almost alive. "Take only what you can carry," he said, his voice sharp, pulling them back from the brink of their greed. "And move fast." The men obeyed, a wave of manic laughter breaking through the oppressive silence for the first time in days. They filled their packs, their arms, their pockets. The sound of clinking gold echoed through the chamber like the most beautiful music they had ever heard. But then, something shifted. The air grew colder, a sudden, biting chill that had nothing to do with the cave. A faint hum began, low and steady, vibrating from deep within the stone walls around them. The carvings on the walls began to glow again, but brighter this time, the golden veins spreading like fire across the rock. The joyful laughter died in their throats. "Captain," one of them whispered, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. Elias looked up. From T-high vaulted ceiling, liquid gold began to drip. Slow, deliberate drops that sizzled and hissed when they hit the stone floor, leaving behind burn marks that smoked faintly in the air. "What in God's name?" Arlam began, but his words were cut short. The walls moved. The gold dust running through the carvings flowed downward, coalescing, gathering into the shape of hands. Hundreds of them. They stretched out from the stone, spectral and grasping, reaching for the men. The sailors screamed. One tried to run, but his foot sank into what he thought was solid. Golded was soft, molten. He fell with a cry, and the floor of treasure swallowed him whole, pulling him under without a trace. "Run!" Elias shouted, grabbing Harlan's arm and yanking him toward the tunnel. The entire chamber began to tremble violently. Treasure cascaded from the walls in golden avalanches. Statues cracked open, revealing skeletons trapped within, their mouths still open in eternal screams. They fled through the winding tunnels, but the gold followed a river of molten light, alive and hungry, chasing them like a living fire. "Faster!" Elias yelled, his voice raw. They stumbled into another cavern smaller, colder, the air thick with the smell of death. In the center stood a single stone coffin, covered in black coral that seemed to absorb the lantern light. Elias stopped dead in his tracks. His lantern flickered wildly, casting shadows that moved as if they had minds of their own. "Captain!" Harlan gasped, clutching at his arm. "Please! Let's go! We have to go!" But Elias was already stepping forward, drawn by an unseen force. Something was calling to him, a whisper, rising from inside the coffin itself. "You came for what was mine." The voice was neither male nor female. It was everywhere in the stone, in the air, inside his own skull. The coffin lid began to move, slowly, with a grating sound like bones grinding against metal. Elias raised his lantern higher, his hand shaking. Inside was not a corpse but a figure made of pure, sculpted gold. A woman, her body crafted with divine perfection, her face serene and beautiful. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted. It was the same sea goddess from the statue they'd seen. "She's beautiful," Elias whispered, mesmerized. Then her eyes opened. They glowed like twin suns. Harlan screamed, a short, sharp cry of pure terror. The golden woman rose from the coffin, her skin cracking and shifting like molten glass. Her voice filled the chamber not in words, but in waves of pure sound that shook the very air itself. "You took from me," she said, the voice echoing not in their ears, but through their bones. "Now you belong to the island." She reached out a single, elegant hand. The gold that lined the walls surged forward, wrapping around the remaining sailors, hardening, instantly turning them into statues of solid gold, their faces frozen forever in expressions of horror. Elias tried to run, but it was too late. The gold caught his leg, pulling him to his knees. He fumbled for his pistol, fired a single, desperate shot that echoed uselessly in the cavern. "Please," he shouted, his voice breaking. "Let me go." The goddess tilted her head, her golden eyes blinking once, slowly. "You wanted to be rich," she whispered, her voice a soft, final judgment. "Now you are." The gold surged up his body, a warm, heavy tide. It sealed his mouth, Tenny's eyes. The very last thing Elias Crow heard before the world turned dark was the faint, distant, eternal sound of waves crashing on a shore he would never leave. When the fog lifted hours later, the cave was silent. The treasure was gone. Only statues remained lifelike, perfect, glimmering faintly in the dying lantern light. Their faces still screamed in silence. And somewhere, deeper in the heart of the island, the goddess of gold slept again, waiting for the next ship and the next greedy souls to arrive.
Chapter 6. The Awakening of the Watchers.
The sea had changed. It wasn't the familiar blue or gray I had known my entire life. Now, it was a deep, shimmering black, so profound it seemed to swallow the light, reflecting nothing back. The waves rose and fell in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though the island itself was breathing through them, each swell a long, drawn-out sigh. I stood alone on the shore, the only one left. The wind carried echoes of my crewmates' their laughter, their voices, their names fading in and out like ghosts. I couldn't be sure if they were real anymore, or just fragments of my memory playing tricks on me. The sand beneath my bare feet shimmered with a faint, golden dust. It clung to everything it touched, and when I tried to brush it from my skin, it remained, glowing softly like dying embers. Behind me, the jungle murmured. It wasn't the sound of birds or rustling leaves, but a low, constant hum, like distant chanting carried on the breeze. The entire island seemed to be in motion, its trees bending toward the sea, their roots trembling as if something colossal, something ancient, was stirring deep within the earth. "It's not over," I whispered to myself, the words barely audible against the island's hum. "Something's still alive here." My eyes drifted to the wreck of our ship, half buried in the shallow surf. Its masts were snapped like twigs, its sails shredded by salt and time. It was a skeleton, a monument to our failure. But as I watched, I saw a faint, golden light pulsing gently from within the cracks of its broken hull. I took a cautious step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The water near the wreck was moving strangely, rippling from beneath the surface, not from the wind above. "No," I murmured, a cold dread washing over me. "Not again." Then a sound rose from the depths. It wasn't a roar, not the crash of a wave, but a voice, or rather, 1,000 whispers blending into one, all of them calling my name, Harlan. I froze. The sound was everywhere, coming from the sea, the sky, the very air itself. He spun around, ready to flee back into the jungle, but the jungle was gone. In its place was an endless, silent mist, swallowing the world. "You're not real," I said aloud, my voice shaking, trying to anchor myself to reality. "You're just echoes." But the ground disagreed. It shook violently beneath me. From the heart of the island, a dull rumble rolled through the earth, a heartbeat, deep and slow. The golden light beneath the sand flared, tracing glowing veins across the beach, all of them leading toward the sea and the ocean. The ocean began to glow in return, answering the island's call. I stumbled backward, shielding my eyes as the water began to rise. It wasn't a wave, but a smooth, impossible curve, lifting itself upward, calm yet heavy with unspoken power. Within that glowing tide, I could see shapes, ethereal outlines of ships, their spectral sails drifting like shadows beneath the surface. "The past," I whispered in awe and terror. "It's all coming back." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of metal and rain. Over the horizon, clouds swirled into a massive spiral, silent lightning flickering within their dark depths. The waves began to move again, their rhythm matching the island's deep pulse, growing stronger with each beat. I turned and ran for the cliffs, my only hope of high ground. Every step felt like wading through molasses, the golden sand clinging to my feet, as if the island itself refused to let me go. The mist thickened, and the whispers grew louder, speaking in a language I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. When I finally reached the ridge, I risked a look back and gasped. A column of light erupted from the center of the island, piercing the swirling clouds above. It wasn't fire. It wasn't gold. It was something else entirely. A pure radiance that filled the air with a hum that felt like music, ancient and powerful. The sea answered this beacon with a deafening thunder. The waves grew into liquid mountains, circling the island in wide, hypnotic spirals. The light within the water shimmered like a galaxy of stars, shifting and moving as if alive. The entire island seemed to take a colossal breath. I dropped to my knees, the truth dawning on me. It's waking the sea. The wind howled, and the first great wave rolled forward. It moved in slow motion, immense and shimmering with an inner light, before crashing against the shore with a sound like the world itself exhaling. A second wave followed, gentler but higher, sweeping across the beach and surging up the cliffs. I clung to the rocks, drenched and trembling, as the glowing tide spread across the land, coating everything in its path with a soft, golden sheen. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The water receded, leaving the island shining faintly in the first light of dawn. The storm above broke apart, the dark clouds dissolving into streaks of pink and silver. The sea was calm once more, as if nothing had happened. I shakily rose to my feet, my body trembling. The air was still, the island was quiet. But beneath that profound silence, I could still feel it, that faint, rhythmic pulse, the heartbeat of something vast and ancient, now hidden once more beneath the waves. "It's not over," I whispered again, this time with certainty. As I stared out at the horizon, the water rippled once. A single, deliberate movement, as though something enormous had just shifted its weight in the deep. And the golden light, faint but undeniably real, flickered one last time beneath the waves before vanishing completely. The story of this island, I knew, had only just begun.
Chapter 7. Escape Under the Cursed Moon.
Days turned into weeks. The island, the one that had held so much promise and so much mystery, was simply gone, vanished from the face of the earth, erased from every map, every chart, every sailor's memory. It was as if the sea itself had decided to swallow it whole, leaving not a single trace behind. But something had changed. In the vast expanse of ocean where the island once stood, the water grew unnaturally still, almost eerily calm. This region quickly earned a name among the mariners who dared to sail nearby: the Silent Deep. Ships that skirted its edges reported strange, thick fogs that appeared out of nowhere, compasses that spun wildly without reason, and the most unsettling of all, faint, echoing voices that seemed to whisper on the mist, coming from somewhere deep beneath the waves. It became a place of legend, a forbidden zone that no sane captain would dare to cross, until one did. The Meros Grace, a sturdy merchant vessel bound for the eastern ports, sailed directly into the heart of the fog on a calm, gray morning. Its captain, Jonas Vale, stood firmly on the deck, a man who trusted his experience over superstitious tales. He watched the horizon dissolve into a blanket of gray and addressed his uneasy crew. "It's just mist," he announced, his voice steady. "We'll be through it by nightfall." But his crew wasn't listening to him. Their attention was captured by something else. Something faint and distant rising from the depths, a sound like bells, soft and melodic, echoing from beneath the waves. As the ship drifted deeper into the fog, a strange phenomenon began to unfold. The sea below them started to glow. A faint golden light shimmered just below the surface, swirling and dancing like slow-burning fire in the dark water. "Bioluminescence," the captain said, trying to force a laugh, trying to rationalize the impossible. Nothing more. But the light grew brighter, more intense. It wasn't random. It was forming patterns. Circles, spirals, and strange symbols that looked unsettlingly familiar, almost like the carvings on an ancient ruin. One of the sailors, his face pale, leaned over the railing, his voice a hushed whisper. "Captain, those marks. They look like they've been carved." Then, suddenly, the wind died completely. The sails, which had been gently pushing them forward, hung limp and lifeless. The sea became a perfect mirror, smooth as glass, and the sound of the bells grew louder, no longer faint but steady and clear, tolling in a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the very hull of the ship. "Anchor the ship," Jonas ordered, his voice tight. "No one moves." But even as he gave the command, the water around them began to shift, not from wind or tide, but from something else. Something massive was stirring in the deep, a shape so immense it couldn't be seen clearly, only felt. A gentle but purposeful current began to swirl around the Meros Grace, turning the ship slowly, as if an unseen hand were guiding it. "It's just a current," one of the men muttered, his voice trembling with a hope he didn't feel. "It'll pass." But then, all eyes fell on the ship's compass. The needle, which had been spinning erratically, trembled violently before coming to a dead stop pointing straight down. The first mate looked at his captain, his face a mask of dread. "Sir," whispered, "there's something directly below us." Gripping a lantern, Jonas leaned over the edge, his heart pounding in his chest. The lantern's beam cut through the dark water, illuminating the abyss below, and he froze. What he saw was impossible. It wasn't ruins. It wasn't a coral reef. It was a city, an entire, sprawling city built of solid gold. Towers, bridges, and great domes shimmered in the deep, their edges glowing with a soft, ethereal light. The architecture was ancient, older than any civilization he had ever known, and its walls were carved with the same spiral symbols that had haunted the lost island. "Impossible," Jonas breathed, his voice barely a whisper. The bells rang again, louder this time, the sound resonating from the heart of the sunken city. The water rippled, and the golden light intensified. Then, from the center of the city, something began to move. A shape, tall and vaguely human, drifted upward with a slow, hypnotic grace. Through the water, its eyes shone like distant stars. The crew stumbled back from the railing, their courage failing them. "Captain!" one of them cried, his voice trembling with sheer terror. "We should leave. Now." The fog, which had thinned for a moment, swirled back in, thicker than before, swallowing the ship whole. The ship's lanterns flickered and dimmed, as if their light was being drained away, and from the depths, a low, resonant hum began to rise, the very same sound that had filled the air on the island just before it sank beneath the waves. The water level began to rise, swirling around the ship, pulling it down. The current gripped the hull, pulling harder, despite the complete absence of wind or tide. The golden light from below crept up the sides of the ship, tracing its lines as if marking it, claiming it. "We're moving," Jonas shouted, trying to break the spell of fear that had paralyzed his crew. "Get to the helm." But it was too late. The ship's wheel spun wildly on its own. The sails, which had been limp moments before, flared out as if caught by a phantom gale. The ship began to turn, slowly but inexorably, toward the heart of the fog, toward the source of the golden light. "What's happening?" One of the men screamed into the disorienting gray. Jonas didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the water below. Hundreds of faint, glowing figures were now drifting just beneath the surface. Some looked like sailors, their forms ghostly and indistinct. Others were barely recognizable shapes, but they were all there, bathed in that faint, golden glow. "Those aren't reflections," he whispered, the horrifying realization dawning on him. The sound of the bells reached a deafening crescendo, clear and deep, and then silence. Abrupt, total silence. The fog thinned as quickly as it had appeared. The horizon reappeared. The ocean calmed, returning to its gentle, rhythmic swell. And the Maro's grace was empty. The ship drifted alone, its sails fluttering softly in the morning light. There was no sign of a struggle, no damage to the vessel, no trace of Captain Jonas Vale or his crew. The only thing left behind was a faint, golden dust scattered across the deck, glowing softly for a moment before fading away with the tide. Weeks later, another ship found her adrift. The crew towed her to the nearest port, puzzled by the pristine but abandoned vessel, but grateful for the valuable salvage. But that night, as the Maro's grace rested quietly in the harbor, the sea just beyond the docks began to glow just a little with a soft, familiar, golden light. And far beneath the waves, in the lost city of gold, the lights of the silent towers flickered once more, like eyes opening in the dark, watching and waiting.
Chapter 8. The Final Message to Those Who Dare.
The sea was quiet again. Too quiet. The region once known as the Silent Deep had simply vanished from the maps. Ocean currents shifted, and even the satellites, our all-seeing eyes in the sky, showed nothing, just endless, unbroken blue. But sailors, they still whispered about it. They said that sometimes, on nights when the moon turned a blood red, a faint golden glow would appear beneath the waves, and if you listened really closely, you could hear the distant tolling of bells. No one dared to go near it. The stories were too dark, the warnings too dire. No one, except for one man. His name was Elias Crow, a historian not just of facts and dates, but of obsessions, and his obsession was lost ships. For years, he'd been a ghost in dusty archives, a shadow in maritime museums, gathering every story, every fragment about the cursed waters. He found old salt-stained journals with ink bleeding across the pages, crude sketches drawn by terrified sailors, and strange, twisted fragments of metal marked with spirals that seemed to defy modern metallurgy. And one name kept appearing, like a ghost in the machine: the Maro's Grace. So, against all logic, against the pleas of his peers and the grim warnings of old sea, Elias chartered a small, sturdy research vessel, the Northwind, and set sail. He wasn't just chasing a legend. He was sailing into the heart of a void to find the truth that lay within it. The journey was deceptively calm for the first few days. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The wind was steady, filling the sails of the Northwind with purpose. There was nothing but the rhythmic creak of the ship and the vast, empty expanse of the ocean. It was so peaceful, you could almost forget you were hunting a nightmare. But on the seventh night, everything changed. The needle of the compass, once a reliable guide, began to spin wildly, a frantic dance of indecision. An unnatural silence fell over the crew. The usual chatter and laughter died on their lips. The sea, which had been alive with gentle swells, turned to a sheet of polished black glass, unnervingly still. "Captain," whispered one of the sailors, his voice tight with fear, his knuckles white as he gripped the railing. "It's here." Elias stared into the mist that had rolled in without a sound, thick and cloying like a damp shroud. And there, faintly at first, like a trick of the eye, he saw it. A shape rising from the fog, a silhouette against the gloom. A golden mast reaching for a sky it hadn't seen in a century. A half-sunken deck, tilted at a grotesque angle, and the faded, ghostly letters on the hull. Letters that sent a shiver down his spine. The Merrow's Grace. The ship that vanished. The ghost he had been chasing. They approached with the caution of a predator stalking its prey. The engine of the Northwind cut to a near-silent hum. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of salt and something else. Something metallic, like old blood or rusted coins. The water beneath them shimmered with a faint, ethereal light, as if someone had scattered gold dust across its surface. Dust that was now floating lazily upward. "No one goes aboard," Elias ordered, his voice a low command that cut through the tense silence. "We only observe. We document, that's all. But curiosity, as they say, is a powerful and often fatal curse." One of the crew, a young man named Rohan, brave and perhaps a little foolish, couldn't resist the pull of the ghost ship. With a determined look, he tied a thick rope around his waist, secured the other end to the Northwind, and took a leap of faith, landing with a thud on the deck of the lost vessel. The ancient wood groaned under his weight, a long, mournful sound. Everything on the ship was coated in a fine, faint gold powder that glowed softly in the encroaching darkness, casting an otherworldly light on the decaying scene. Ropes lay in petrified coils, and barrels had fused to the deck. "Captain, there's something written here," Rowan called out, his voice sounding strangely muffled by the thick air. His hand was tracing something on the main mast. Driven by his own relentless obsession, Elias couldn't stay behind. He climbed up after him, his boots landing on the same groaning deck. Rohan was right. Carved deep into the wood of the main mast, in a hand that must have been shaking with terror, were 3 words: "The sea remembers." As soon as Elias read them aloud, a cold, unnatural wind swept across the deck, tearing at their clothes. The glassy sea erupted. The waves rose suddenly, angrily, crashing against the hulls of both ships. The fog, which had been a passive observer, thickened and wrapping the 2 vessels together like a shroud, binding the living to the dead. Back to the north. "Now!" Elias shouted, the urgency in his voice sharp as a blade. But it was too late. From the water below, from the very depths of the abyss, came the tolling of bells, deep, resonant, and mournful, the same sound that had haunted sailors' nightmares for generations, the sound that had doomed all the others who came before. The sea began to glow again, but this time it wasn't a gentle shimmer. Golden lights erupted from the depths, rising in hypnotic, swirling spirals around them. The waves heaved, and the ships were tossed like toys. And then they came. Out of the glowing depths, shapes began to drift upward. Hundreds of them, silent, spectral figures, like shadows given form. They surrounded both ships in a silent, suffocating ring, their eyes glowing with a faint, cold light. They weren't ghosts of sailors. They were something older, something born of the deep. Elias gripped the railing, his knuckles bone white, his historian's mind scrambling to find a logical explanation where there was none. He stared down at the silent, watching figures. "What do you want?" he whispered, the words stolen by the wind. A voice answered. It was calm, distant, and it seemed to echo from every direction at once, from the water, the fog, the very air he was breathing. It was the voice of the ocean itself. To remember. And with that single, chilling statement, the sea opened. The fog turned a brilliant, blinding gold, flooding the sky with an impossible light. For a single, terrifying, beautiful moment, Elias saw everything. He saw the sunken city of myth, its impossible architecture gleaming. He saw the fleet of lost ships, the Merrow's Grace, just one of many, all perfectly preserved. And he saw the endless, silent faces of those who had vanished over the centuries, all glowing, all staring back at him, their eyes filled not with malice, but with a profound, eternal stillness. Then, as suddenly as it began, there was silence. The sea closed, the golden light faded, swallowed by the darkness. When the morning came, the sun rose on an empty ocean. There was no island, no ghost ship, no sign of the Northwind or its crew. There was only the open sea, calm and blue and utterly indifferent. But some nights, when the wind is just right and the moon is low on the horizon, fishermen still swear they can see faint lights beneath the water. They see golden spirals, swirling slowly in the dark, as if something ancient and vast, something deep below, still breathes. The sea remembers, and it waits. Always, if you enjoyed this journey into the depths, don't let it be your last. Subscribe for more dark tales of the unknown. And if you dare, like, share, and follow for the next voyage. Because sometimes, the stories that vanish are the ones still watching us from the deep. Thanks for listening.